She didn't know I was awake when she said it. I wasn't even supposed to hear her. She thought I was already asleep, lights off, back turned, breathing slow. But I wasn't. I heard every word. She was on the phone, whispering with someone, probably one of her bridesmaids. The laughter in her voice was light, casual, like she was talking about nothing serious. Then she said it. I swear to God, I have to drink before I can do anything with him. I mean, he's sweet, but God, I just don't feel anything when I look at him. Not unless I've had a few. I felt my stomach twist. At first, I thought I'd misheard. But she repeated it. Laughed. Even said it again in a different way. He's not ugly, exactly, just, not my type. I need something to take the edge off. I lay there, frozen. She hung up a few minutes later, crawled into bed, and kissed the back of my neck. I pretended to be asleep. I didn't move. I couldn't. I kept my breathing steady while my thoughts raced. All this time, I thought we were building something real. I thought the wedding we were planning was the beginning of a forever kind of love. And here she was, admitting that the only way she could touch me, could sleep with me, was if she was tipsy, numbed, detached. I wanted to confront her. I wanted to sit up, look her in the eyes, and ask her why. Why would she agree to marry someone she clearly wasn't attracted to? Why wouldn't she just leave? But I didn't say a word. I told myself it was because I didn't want to overreact. That maybe she was just drunk. Maybe it was a joke. Maybe it was wedding stress. I clung to those excuses like they were life preservers, but deep down, I knew better. The next morning, I acted normal. She was cheerful, talkative, sipping coffee and humming to herself like she hadn't ripped my insides apart just hours earlier. I watched her and wondered how many other nights she drank before being with me. How many times had her smile been fake? How much of our intimacy was a lie? And still, I said nothing. It's hard to explain why. Maybe I was afraid of the answer. Maybe I thought that silence would buy me time. Time to fix it. Time to make her love me the way I loved her. Or maybe I just didn't want to face the truth, that I wasn't enough. Not for her. In the days leading up to the wedding, I kept noticing little things I'd ignored before. How she always poured herself a glass of wine before bed, even when she said she was tired. How she touched me only after finishing a drink. How she avoided eye contact during moments that should have been vulnerable. There were hints, tiny, sharp clues I hadn't wanted to see. And now, I couldn't unsee them. The night before our wedding, we had dinner with our families. She laughed through most of it, told stories, charmed everyone. But I watched her refill her glass 3 times. She needed liquid courage for everything, even just to stand beside me. That night, after everyone left, we sat on the couch alone. She leaned into me, whispered something sweet, and tried to pull me in. I gently pulled away. Told her I was tired. She didn't protest. Just nodded, poured herself another drink, and walked into the bedroom. I sat there in the dark for a long time, staring at the floor, listening to the sounds of her moving around behind the door. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat there, hollowed out, wondering what kind of man marries a woman who doesn't want him. The morning of the wedding came, and I still hadn't said anything. My friends told me I looked pale, distant. I smiled and brushed them off. Just nerves, I said. Normal cold feet. But it wasn't cold feet. It was grief. It was me mourning a version of love I thought I had, one that was now unraveling in silence. When I saw her walking down the aisle, she looked beautiful. Radiant. Like someone who was sure of everything. But I wasn't. I looked at her and felt like a fraud. A placeholder in someone else's fantasy. The man who checked the boxes but never stirred the heart. And still I said, I do. I don't know why I did it. Maybe I hoped things would change. Maybe I thought that marriage would be the reset button. That she'd learn to love me in time. That if I just gave it enough patience, enough care, things would feel right again. But hope can be cruel. It stretches you thin. It makes you swallow things you should never have to taste. The first night of our honeymoon, she drank 2 glasses of wine before getting into bed. I didn't say anything. I just watched. She kissed me, clumsy and too eager. I let her. But I felt nothing. Nothing but shame. She fell asleep quickly, breathing shallow and steady. I stared at the ceiling for hours, listening to the waves crashing outside. I should have felt happy. I should have felt fulfilled. But all I felt was empty. The silence between us had become louder than any vow we exchanged. She had no idea I knew. No idea that every touch, every laugh, every "I love you" from her now felt like a performance. And the worst part? I still wanted it to be real. I still clung to the illusion. Because admitting the truth meant acknowledging that I had just married someone who never really wanted me. And that kind of truth doesn't just hurt, it shatters. But for now, I stayed silent. Pretending. Hoping. Drowning in a love that no longer existed. And that was only the beginning. The wedding was beautiful. Everyone said so. The flowers, the venue, the vows, perfect, like something from a magazine. And yet, behind every compliment, every toast, every smiling photo, I felt like I was standing on a fault line, just waiting for it to crack. She was glowing that day. Confident, graceful, holding my hand with practiced ease. I kept wondering how someone could look at me with so much love in public but need a drink to look at me in private. That thought looped in my head as I stood at the altar. I should have walked away. But I didn't. During the reception, she stuck close to her friends. She laughed louder than usual. Drank faster, too. I lost count of how many glasses she had before our first dance. Her eyes were glassy by then, her movements a little looser, her grip on my hand a little too tight, like she was holding on to something she didn't want to feel. I tried to focus on the good, the friends who flew across the country, the way my mother teared up during the ceremony, how proud my father looked. I tried to convince myself that those things meant something. That if I held on to those moments, maybe I could hold us together too. But the feeling never left. That cold weight in my stomach. That ache behind my ribs. She'd made her feelings clear, and I had done nothing about it. Now I was wearing a ring that felt like a chain. That night in the hotel suite, she was tipsy before we even got there. I watched her sip champagne in the limo while talking about how excited she was for the honeymoon. She leaned her head on my shoulder, told me how lucky she was. I nodded, smiled, kissed the top of her head, and felt nothing but doubt. As she got ready for bed, I sat on the edge of the mattress, still wearing my shirt and tie, staring at the carpet. When she came out in her robe, drink in hand, I knew how the night would go. She set the glass down, climbed onto the bed, and kissed me. Her breath was sweet and sharp with alcohol. We went through the motions. I tried to forget what I knew. Tried to feel something that resembled intimacy. But her touch felt distant. Her kisses were automatic. Like she was acting out a part she didn't believe in anymore. She fell asleep quickly, wrapped in the sheets, peaceful and unaware. I lay beside her, eyes open, heart numb. The silence between us had never been louder. The next morning, she was cheerful again. Bragged about how amazing everything had been. Said the wedding felt like a dream. I played along. Told her it was perfect. Smiled when she kissed me. Pretended like nothing was wrong. But inside, something had shifted. A part of me had gone quiet. On the flight to our honeymoon, I started tracking it. Not out of paranoia, just a need for clarity. I opened a note in my phone and started logging every drink she had. It started with the complimentary champagne on the plane. Then a glass of wine with dinner. Then another once we landed at the resort. By the time we went to bed, she'd had 3 drinks. I noticed how she seemed distant until the alcohol kicked in. How her touch changed. How her words softened. I noticed how she avoided undressing near me, unless she was tipsy. I noticed everything I hadn't let myself see before. The next night, it was the same. A cocktail at sunset. A shot at the hotel bar. Then the moment she leaned into me, almost like clockwork. I wanted to believe she loved me. I wanted to believe the alcohol was just a habit, not a requirement. But I couldn't lie to myself anymore. By the fourth night, the pattern was unmissable. She didn't initiate anything until she was at least 2 drinks in. If she wasn't drinking, she'd say she was tired, or not in the mood. If she was, she suddenly became affectionate, flirtatious. Everything I used to think was real. I didn't say anything. I just kept logging the drinks. One night, I tried touching her before she'd had anything. Her body stiffened. She gently pulled away, saying she wasn't feeling well. Then, an hour later, after a few glasses of wine, she pulled me close like nothing had happened. That's when I knew it wasn't about timing. It was about tolerance. She couldn't face me without a buffer. She couldn't be vulnerable unless something inside her was dulled first. And I was starting to realize it had always been this way. We visited the beach, went on excursions, took pictures together. From the outside, we looked like any happy couple. But inside, I was beginning to disconnect. Not out of anger, but self-preservation. I didn't know how long I could keep pretending. Every night, I hoped she would surprise me. That she'd pour water instead of wine. That she'd touch me with clarity, not clouded eyes. That maybe she'd say something real. But it never came. One night, I asked her why she drank so much. I kept my tone casual, tried not to sound accusatory. She laughed and said, "It's our honeymoon, babe. Let me enjoy it." Then she poured another glass and changed the subject. I didn't push. What would be the point? She wasn't ready to talk about it, and I wasn't ready to hear the truth spoken out loud. I think a part of me still wanted to believe we could fix it. That maybe, once we got home, once the wedding pressure was gone, things would settle. That she'd grow into the marriage. That love would come later. But that's the dangerous thing about waiting. You think you're being patient, when really you're just delaying the inevitable. And deep down, I already knew, this wasn't something that could be fixed. Not with time. Not with effort. Not with hope. Because love doesn't come in a bottle. And attraction doesn't grow in silence. By the time we got home, the damage was already done. We unpacked our bags, but we didn't unpack the distance. It came with us. Lingering in every room, every word we didn't say. We were newlyweds in name only. The drinking didn't stop. If anything, it became more routine. A glass of wine while cooking, another during dinner, a third before bed. Some nights it was subtle. Other nights it was the only thing that bridged the silence between us. I tried to act like things were normal. I went to work, came home, asked about her day. She gave the same surface-level answers every time: fine, good, busy. Her eyes stayed on her phone more than on me. Her laughter never reached her eyes. And the bedroom? It went quiet. At first, she made excuses. Headaches. Stress. Periods. Too tired. I believed her. Or maybe I just didn't want to admit what was obvious. When she drank, she wanted me. When she didn't, I was invisible. I started to resent the pattern. The way she'd come alive after a few glasses, then act like nothing was wrong the next day. Like we were still a real couple. Like I didn't notice how forced it all was. One night, she reached for me after her third drink. I pulled away. Not out of anger, but because I didn't want to be a prop in her routine. She frowned, confused. Asked if I was okay. I told her I was tired. That became the new lie. I'm tired. A phrase we both used to hide from the truth either of us wanted to confront. Weeks passed. Then a month. Then 2. We stopped trying. We became polite strangers sharing a space. We didn't fight. We didn't touch. We existed beside each other, hollow and careful. One morning, I found an old photo album buried in a box she hadn't unpacked. I flipped through it out of boredom. But what I found hit harder than I expected. Pictures of her and her exes. Smiling. Carefree. Younger maybe, but undeniably alive. There was one guy who appeared in multiple pictures. A long-term relationship, clearly. They looked happy, truly happy. No stiffness. No forced poses. Just genuine closeness. I stared at those photos longer than I should have. Later that night, I asked her about him. Casual tone again. She hesitated, then said, "That was years ago. It didn't work out." I pressed a little more. She said he cheated? Left her wrecked. Said she didn't think she'd ever trust again after that. I wanted to believe that's why she was distant. That maybe her heart was still healing. But then she added, almost absent-mindedly, "He was the only guy I ever really lost myself in." The words landed like a knife. She didn't mean to say it like that. I saw it in her face. But the damage was done. She had loved someone, once. Fully, deeply. And I wasn't that someone. That night, she drank more than usual. 4 glasses. Maybe 5. She cried during the 3rd. Laughed too loudly during the 4th. By the 5th, she was touching me again. Desperate. Needy. Like she was trying to drown something inside her. I let her. Not because I wanted her, but because I wanted to feel wanted, if only for a moment. But afterward I felt emptier than before. A few days later, she left her laptop open. I wasn't snooping, not at first. I was looking for a file. But I saw her messages. A conversation with a friend. She was venting. Talking about how she thought marriage would feel different. That she thought maybe love would grow. That she didn't hate me, but she didn't feel in love either. Then came the line that broke me. "I know I'm not being fair to him. He deserves someone who looks at him and feels something. I just don't." I closed the laptop quietly. Sat on the couch. Stared at the floor. The truth was out. Not just what she said, but how she said it. Calm. Confessional. Honest in a way she'd never been with me. I didn't confront her that night. Or the next. I needed time to decide what to do. I started thinking about the man I used to be, before all this. Before the silence. Before I started believing that being tolerated was the same as being loved. I thought about the compromises I'd made. The parts of myself I'd buried just to keep this thing afloat. And I realized I'd lost more than my dignity. I'd lost my voice. She wasn't cruel. She didn't cheat. She didn't yell or lie. But indifference can be just as brutal. A slow erosion of the soul. We were 2 people trapped in a performance, both afraid to admit it was over. I stayed because I didn't want to be alone. She stayed because she didn't want to be the villain. But sometimes, the most painful thing isn't betrayal, it's the quiet truth that love was never really there to begin with. And once you see that truth, you can unsee it. I began to detach. Emotionally, mentally, then physically. Not out of revenge, out of survival. I stopped initiating conversations. I let the silence stretch longer each day. She noticed, but didn't press. Maybe she was relieved. Maybe she was tired of pretending too. The intimacy vanished completely. No touches, no looks. Not even the alcohol could revive it anymore. She still drank, but now it wasn't tied to any desire, it was habit. Background noise. A crutch. I started staying later at work. Volunteering for extra shifts. I found comfort in the distance, in the mindless repetition of tasks that didn't ask me to smile, love, or lie. I stopped checking my phone for her messages. There weren't any. One night, I came home to find her asleep on the couch, wine glass half full, the TV flickering in the dark. I stood there, looking at her. A woman I married, a woman I wanted to build a life with, and all I felt was numb. I went to bed without waking her. It had become routine. Eventually, I asked her for space. Not dramatically. Just told her I needed some time to think. She blinked, took a breath, then said okay. No questions, no protest, no anger. Just quiet resignation. That told me everything. I packed a bag and stayed with a friend for a week. During that time, I started seeing things clearly. I wasn't grieving her. I was grieving the idea of what we were supposed to be. The version of us that only ever existed in my head. I remembered how badly I wanted it to work. How much I ignored, justified, and endured, just to feel wanted. But being needed isn't the same as being loved. And I deserved more than being someone's compromise. I started therapy. Just one session at first. I told the therapist everything. About the drinking, the confession, the photos, the distance. She didn't say much at first, just listened. Then she said something that stuck with me. You're mourning a fantasy. But fantasies don't make for lasting relationships. Truth does. I let that sink in. For the first time, I realized I wasn't a victim. I had played a role in this. I stayed when I should have left. I gave when I should have walked. I wanted love so badly I mistook tolerance for affection. The next day, I went back to the apartment. She was there, sitting at the kitchen table, eyes red, a mug of tea in her hands instead of wine. I sat across from her. We didn't talk for a while. Just sat in the weight of what we both knew. Then I said it. I don't think this marriage is working. She nodded. Not in agreement, just acknowledgement. Like she'd been waiting for me to say it. I wanted to feel different, she said softly. I thought maybe love would come after. I really did. I know, I said. And I kept hoping I could make you love me. She didn't cry. Neither did I. It wasn't a moment of heartbreak, it was a moment of release. Like two people who had been holding their breath finally letting go. We talked logistics. Who would move out? What we'd do with the lease. How we'd tell our families. It was all calm, like planning a business transition, not the end of a marriage. But I wasn't angry. And I didn't hate her. I pitied us both, for wasting so much time trying to mold ourselves into something that never fit. The next week, I moved out permanently. I found a small place. Quiet, modest. Just enough for one. It was the first space in months that felt like mine. No tension. No unspoken pain. Just air. I started rebuilding from there. Not the grand, dramatic kind of rebuilding. Small, steady steps. Cooking for myself. Sleeping through the night. Reading again. Going on walks without the weight in my chest. Therapy continued. I talked more, unpacked the years before her, the insecurities that led me to cling to a relationship built on empty hope. I started forgiving myself, not for leaving, but for not leaving sooner. Eventually, I told my parents. They were surprised, but not shocked. They said they sensed something at the wedding. That she looked more nervous than joyful. That I looked tense. I guess love isn't the only thing people can see. Friends reached out. Some offered sympathy. Others offered silence, and that was fine too. I wasn't looking for comfort. Just clarity. She and I kept contact minimal. There was nothing cruel about it, just necessity. We had said everything we needed to say. Dragging it out would only deepen the wound. Months passed. I changed. Not drastically, but deeply. I learned how to be alone without being lonely. I stopped defining my worth by whether someone else found me attractive. I stopped needing to be wanted to feel valuable. One night, I sat down and read our wedding vows again. I found the copies she gave me, folded in a drawer. The words felt hollow now. Not because they were lies, but because they were never grounded in truth. They were wishes, both hers and mine. I put them away and went to sleep without sadness. Because I wasn't broken anymore. Just wiser. Sometimes love doesn't look like what you expected. Sometimes it's not love at all, it's comfort, convenience, fear of solitude. And sometimes it takes the slow burn of disappointment to recognize that. But once you do, once you see the truth, you don't settle again. You don't chase people who tolerate you. You don't wait for someone to drink just to see your worth. You become someone who doesn't need permission to be loved. Life after the divorce didn't suddenly become magical. There was no dramatic rebirth, no overnight transformation. Healing was slow, silent, often unremarkable. But it was real. And it came not from chasing closure, but from choosing clarity, every single day. I kept things quiet. No big announcements, no emotional posts online. Just space. I needed to live in my own skin again, without someone else's opinions dictating my value. Without chasing validation through someone else's affection. The people who mattered stayed close. A few close friends, my sister, even one of my coworkers who'd gone through a similar divorce years ago. We had quiet, honest talks about shame, disappointment, and the kind of loneliness that doesn't come from being alone, but from being with the wrong person. I realized I'd been lonely inside that marriage for a long time. I just didn't have the words for it then. Now I did. The first real shift came one evening while brushing my teeth. I looked at myself, really looked. Not to judge. Not to pick apart. Just to see. For the first time in years, I didn't feel disgusted. I didn't feel like I needed to be more desirable, more impressive, more anything. I felt like me. And that was enough. That moment wasn't loud. But it changed everything. I started journaling. Nothing poetic. Just raw truth. Pages filled with sentences like, I tried too hard, she never wanted me the way I wanted her. And, I'm allowed to want passion. I didn't censor. I didn't overthink. I just wrote what hurt, and slowly, it started to hurt less. Sometimes, I'd write letters I never sent. One to her. One to myself. One to the version of me who stayed too long. I forgave him. He was doing his best with what he knew. I didn't date right away. I didn't want to. I needed to make peace with the silence first. With nights spent alone without equating them to failure. I started to enjoy my own company. Cooked meals I liked. Watched movies without worrying if she was bored. Learned how to enjoy the stillness. That's when it hit me. Love isn't supposed to make you shrink. It's supposed to expand you. I began seeing patterns in my past relationships. I always compromised first. I always gave more. I always tried to prove I was enough. But the truth was brutal and freeing. If someone doesn't feel desire for you, if they don't see you with that raw, magnetic pull, you can't convince them to. You can't earn attraction. That lesson cracked something open in me. Not bitterness. Not cynicism. Just clarity. Love built on, maybe it'll grow, is a time bomb. And I'd already lived through the explosion. With that clarity, I finally started rebuilding my self-respect. Not the performative kind. The real kind. I set boundaries. I stopped people-pleasing. I became okay with disappointing others if it meant honoring myself. I stopped over-explaining. I stopped apologizing for having standards. People noticed. I wasn't louder, just steadier. More grounded. And ironically, the less I tried to be attractive, the more magnetic I became, to the right people. I started going out again. Nothing wild. Just reconnecting. Old friends, small gatherings, the occasional event. I wasn't searching for anyone. But I wasn't hiding anymore either. I met someone at a bookstore, of all places. Not a love story, not yet. But a human moment. We talked about the book in her hand. She smiled like she meant it. There was no pressure, no performance. Just presence. And that, for me, was enough. We got coffee the next week. Laughed. Talked honestly. I told her I'd been married before. Told her I was still working on myself. She didn't flinch. She just nodded. Said she respected it. That's when I realized something powerful. Maturity doesn't fear scars. It honors them. Whether or not she becomes something more in my life doesn't matter. What matters is that I didn't shrink this time. I didn't mold myself to be liked. I showed up as I am. There's a different kind of confidence that comes from walking through emotional fire and surviving. Not the kind that brags. The kind that doesn't need to. My ex reached out once. Just a simple message. Hope you're well. I didn't ignore her. But I didn't open old wounds either. I replied kindly. Briefly. Let the conversation die in peace. That chapter was closed. And I was done rereading it. These days, I don't define myself by what happened. But I don't erase it either. That marriage, that pain, those long nights wondering what was wrong with me, they shaped me. Taught me. And the biggest lesson? Never beg to be loved. Never twist yourself into someone's fantasy hoping you'll feel like home. You deserve to be chosen when they're sober. Desired when you're quiet. Respected when you're broken. You deserve someone who doesn't have to drink to want you. Someone who doesn't look for excuses to feel. Someone who sees you, and stays willingly every time. But before you can find them, you have to become that for yourself. That's the real recovery. Not moving on fast. Not replacing them. But learning to love the version of you that made it out. And I finally did. It's strange how the final stage of healing isn't dramatic. It's subtle. Quiet. You wake up one day and realize the weight is gone. Not because something massive happened, but because you've carried it long enough to finally let it go. I no longer feel resentment toward her. That took time. At first, I wanted an apology that acknowledged everything. The nights she drank to touch me, the way she looked at me like obligation, the betrayal of marrying me when her heart wasn't in it. But over time, I understood something deeper. Forgiveness doesn't require an apology. It requires a decision. So I made the decision to forgive, not for her, but for myself. Carrying hate is heavy. I was tired of being weighed down by memories that no longer served me. I didn't want to keep identifying with pain. I wanted freedom. The truth is, we were both unprepared. She didn't know how to love. I didn't know how to demand love that felt real. She was lost in her past, and I was trying to build a future with someone still grieving ghosts. We were never equals in affection. She tolerated, I pursued. And that imbalance poisoned everything. But the man I am now would never settle for that imbalance again. In therapy, I stopped focusing on her and started focusing on me. Why did I stay when I felt unloved? Why did I believe I needed to earn attraction, to work for it, as if worthiness was conditional? The answer was simple. I had tied my value to being needed. Not loved. Just needed. Once I broke that chain, everything changed. I learned to hold space for discomfort. To sit with loneliness without reaching for distraction. I learned how to validate my own emotions without needing someone else to understand them first. And that's when I stopped repeating old patterns. The dating world looks different now. I'm not rushing into anything. I'm not chasing validation. If I sense ambivalence, I step away. If I feel like I'm becoming a version of myself just to be accepted, I pause. Because I'm not performing anymore. I'm showing up real, or not at all. I've become someone I'm proud of. Not perfect. But principled. I speak my truth calmly now. I don't need to argue to be understood. I don't need to win anyone over. If it's not mutual, I move on. If I'm not desired deeply and clearly, I'm out. Because love, when it's healthy, doesn't leave you guessing. I used to think I needed a relationship to prove I was worthy. Now I know my worth is what determines the relationship I allow. Sometimes people ask if I regret marrying her. I don't. That experience taught me what no book, no advice, no conversation ever could. It taught me what betrayal wrapped in politeness looks like. What emptiness dressed as routine feels like. And how to walk away from someone who never truly saw me. It taught me the difference between being chosen and being settled for. And in that I found the most important lesson: never confuse access with affection. Just because someone shares space with you doesn't mean they care. Just because someone marries you doesn't mean they love you in the way you deserve to be loved. She said she had to drink to be intimate. That sentence haunted me. But now I see it for what it was: her confession of emotional detachment. Her struggle, not my flaw. And that shift changed everything. I no longer feel unattractive. I no longer carry that shame. Because I know I am not for everyone, and I don't have to be. But for the right person, I will never feel like a chore. I won't have to be consumed with doubt or suspicion. I won't need to monitor their drinking to feel desired. I'll just be wanted. Fully. Clearly. Soberly. And that standard is non-negotiable. I've started writing more, privately, not for anyone else. It's my way of processing without bleeding all over people who didn't cut me. I've found peace in quiet routines, joy in simplicity. I've started looking ahead, not backward. There's no more urge to dissect the past. I've made peace with it. She did what she knew. I did what I thought would earn love. We both failed, and from that failure came growth. I hope she's doing better now. I don't check. I don't need to. Whatever she's facing is her journey. I just know I'm not in it anymore, and that's exactly how it should be. When I look back, I don't see a tragedy. I see a turning point. That marriage was the end of an old version of me, the one who begged, who chased, who performed. That man died so a stronger one could be born. Now, I don't seek love to fill a void. I seek it to share abundance. I don't need someone to complete me. I want someone who complements me. There's a difference. And I finally live in that difference. This isn't a love story. Not in the traditional sense. But it's a story of self-love. Of reclaiming dignity after betrayal. Of rebuilding confidence when someone you trusted made you feel unworthy. And maybe, that's the most important kind of love story there is. Because once you truly love yourself, completely, unapologetically, you stop fearing solitude. You stop shrinking. You stop waiting to be chosen. You start choosing. I choose peace. I choose standards. I choose me.